everybody, and welcome back to another episode of What's the Word? I'm your host, Abby, and today we have a special guest for you. Today we're joined with Austin Johnson. And Austin, why don't you give us a little bit of background about yourself?
You already gave me the introduction. My name is Austin Johnson. I just graduated Embry Riddle in this last May of 2024. We were just kind of talking, and now it's already February. It's already been almost a whole year since I graduated, which is a little crazy. But I'm from Northern Utah. Obviously, spent 4 years at Embry Riddle, and now have just moved out to Southern California, up in Lancaster, and I work at Edwards Air Force Base. Yeah, school was great, and the new job has been great.
Awesome. And what was your major when you were at Riddle?
Funny enough, because I think there's a lot of a beef. There's quite the feud between all the aerospace engineers and the mechanical engineers. So I started out as an aerospace engineer, and then during my first year, I actually switched to mechanical. Super awesome switch. I really enjoyed it. I know a lot of people enjoy it, but ultimately mechanical engineering on the propulsion track.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds very fun. And do you have a favorite memory from your time at Riddle you'd like to share with us?
Picking one is definitely hard, right? I imagine that's something you hear a lot. As far as just like being in school and living, I think like the stressful student life, a lot of my favorite memories included like finishing a super stressful exam or finishing even like the semester, right? And then like you just get this weight lifted off your shoulders and then like kind of celebrating with some friends. We either like go camping, I mean, a house party, whatever, have a good time, get the chance to kind of hang out with your friends after kind of like accomplishing your academic goals even, right?
Right. And I'm sure you can take that feeling into the workplace. And segueing into that, what do you do for work right now?
So I am an operations engineer. And for people that aren't in the know, because right, that doesn't mean a whole lot of things for people that aren't already at Edwards Air Force Base. I more or less am doing flight test engineering up at Edwards.
Awesome. So do you have a favorite part about this job that you can share with us?
Frankly, honestly, super related to school. I would say my favorite part so far, I'm still relatively new. I've been here for less than a year, is been the fact that I'm able to learn so much, right? I am in a relatively different field than what some of my schooling is. That's kind of always how it is for people going from kind of college to then going to industry, right? Is you kind of think you know it all, and then you get to the industry and you're like, you almost don't know anything, right? So my favorite part is frankly being able to like come to work, see all these new things, learn all these new things. So just learning so much every day has been awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, that you never truly stop learning saying is coming to mind right now.
Yeah, you have to keep learning if you're gonna keep living. That's just the bottom line.
Right. Oh yeah. And so what does a typical day look like?
Any job is super fluid, right? But I would say a very general day is kind of meeting with the customers and saying, okay, from a given like test execution, what kind of outputs do you guys need? And I have to be pretty particular about like, okay, what are we doing and how can I make sure that we actually are getting the outputs that the customer is looking for? So a lot of, again, writing these test plans, writing these test cards, and working a lot with test teams and mission control rooms to understand exactly how we're going to get these outputs. And that's most of my job for sure.
Awesome. And you answered my next question for you. It was, how do you tie writing into your day to day?
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's a huge part of my job, right? Is writing test cards and especially test plans. But I think test cards is a great example of you have to be very specific and you need to convey a lot of information, but it needs to be very concise and ultimately very digestible, right? A pilot can't be up in the air going supersonic, right? And be reading your test card and not understanding or it's too long, right? So a lot of my job entails, okay, I need him to do this, but I need to frankly use as few words as possible, but still make it extremely clear. So there's an element in writing that I feel like I've never had to exercise until being here of super clear, super concise work, right? You always want your work to be clear and be concise, but you usually have a little more leeway versus this is a whole new world of that.
Right, right. And so now by test card, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question actually. So what a test card entails, right, is you have like two halves of a test card, right? You have one half is going to be what you're giving your pilot, right? And it ultimately says like, okay, for this test card, it's giving you the specifications of like you're going to be at this speed, this altitude, here's your goal, and then it kind of walks the pilot through like, okay, you're going, these are going to be your initial conditions at this altitude, and then let's say you're going to initiate a roll and you're going to kind of communicate with your test conductor on the ground in a mission control room, and there's going to be a lot of back and forth to then actually execute a maneuver, kind of get feedback from the pilot to the test conductor back and forth, as well as the test conductor in the mission control room is going to have their own version of this. Once again, just kind of walking through, okay, here's exactly how we're going to do this maneuver and get the data that we're seeking.
Oh, perfect. And I can definitely see how clarity and conciseness are very important for that.
Yeah, yeah. Doing executing tests is, as you can probably guess, very expensive, very time consuming, and there's so many different kind of approvals that are associated with it that your test day finally comes, right? And you can't afford to mess things up, right? Because if for whatever reason you don't get a given test point or actually you get what you're looking for, right? You may not be able to actually get a jet in the air and test these things again for another month.
Right, right. Oh, yeah. And so do you typically write these test cards, or are there other genres of writing that you rely on as well?
It's definitely primarily like technical report writing. I would almost still consider test cards being like a form of technical report writing, but I would say a lot of what I have to do is very like rhetorical writing, in that a lot of my job also includes kind of convincing different folks to execute the test this way because X and Y, right? So rhetorical writing is a big part of anything, just because if you want to get anything done, it usually involves convincing someone or a large party to actually do your thing, right? So between tech report writing as well as rhetoric is a big part of my job.
Oh, okay, okay, I gotcha. Did you say that you've taken a lot from your time at Riddle and are able to apply it in the writing sense in the workplace?
Definitely, definitely. Between even my courses at my time at Embry Riddle, as well as my capstone, they all definitely gave me a good foundation of kind of knowledge to fall back on, as far as like, I took a technical report writing class at school, right? And now that's given me the opportunity to like kind of implement some of that, as well as make it much more large scale. So appreciate the writing courses I did have to take, especially as an engineer, right? Because that's considered the lesser course, kind of less focused of a course in your degree, but ultimately super helpful, and I use it every day.
Perfect. Yeah. And have you noticed any big differences and or similarities in the writing you do at Riddle?
I mean, I think going back to kind of some of the rhetoric I was talking about earlier is I think it's very similar, right? In that during school, you are typically writing something or creating something to then convince your professor to give you a certain grade or a certain outcome, right? It's usually the form of a grade. You graduate to industry, and your job is now to create a same product, kind of show your acuity in something to then get your product made or actually move something forward, which then at the end of the day is what gets you paid, right? So you're still creating a product to convince something or do something. It's just now that kind of your intrinsic reward is different. I'm no longer looking for good grades. I'm now looking for a good product so that, I can get paid and keep a good career, right?
Right, right. And I would say that's a very important thing to strive for.
For sure. For sure.
Yes.
Gotta do good in school, that's a big part of it. But I will say that it's just so different because school is obviously pretty consequence free in comparison, right? Like the worst that could possibly happen is you get a bad grade, right? Versus you then go to industry, and if you created a poor product, this could then, let's say worst case scenario, like endanger lives, right? You're endangering lives, you're costing a lot of money.
Right. So that additional kind of weight added on you.
Yeah, there's a lot more to consider for sure.
Yeah. And now, straying away from writing a little bit, is there anything
Okay.
you wish you would have known before leaving college and entering the real world?
If I could kind of go back and tell myself anything, it would probably just to be like apply myself even more, right? I like to think I went out and I joined clubs, but joining clubs, trying hard in classes, right? College is a great opportunity to push your limits and learn more. So I almost wish if I could go back, I would have pushed even harder, learned more, because more knowledge is more power. And a lot of the things I learned even outside of the classes at school kind of got me where I'm at today, which was a huge part of just the entire experience for school. It wasn't just classes, it was everything outside of it.
Right. Okay. And so, my last question for you today, Austin, do you have any advice for our current Eagles?
I just kind of talked about some of the advice I'd give to myself. And frankly, I think a lot of that advice to some of the current students would apply all the same, in that being in school now or going into school, whatever, wherever you're at, I guess, in your academic career, is the perfect time to learn as much as you can and do as much as you can, because, again, like I mentioned earlier, it's a completely consequence free environment, right? Mess up as much as you can, do as much as you can, learn as much as you can, because that's going to ultimately inform your decisions on what it is you actually want to do and pursue in your career after graduation and moving into industry. So learn as much as you can and get involved on all the different clubs and things to do on campus for sure.
Perfect, and that is great advice. Thank you, Austin. And that wraps up this week's episode of What's the Word? We want to give another big thank you to Austin for being on with us this week. We absolutely loved having you on. If you're new to our podcast, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, and be sure to stay tuned for more.
This podcast is supported by the Department of Humanities and Communication at Embry Riddle Aeronautical University in Prescott, Arizona. Our hosts are Abigail Bradbury and Owen Smith. Matthew Haslam is the department chair, and I'm Amelia Chesley, assistant professor of professional writing. Many thanks to the Prescott Campus Writing and Design Lab for hosting our transcripts. The intro and outro music is Wanderer by Alex. You can find us where most podcasts are found, and please do reach out if you are a Prescott Campus alum. We'd love to feature you in a future episode.